And then perfusion. That is a term you will definitely hear. Flow. What is the amount? What's the amount of the blood flowing through an organ, the tissue, the blood vessel at a given time? Usually measured in milliliters per minute. The perfusion. What is the flow for a given mass, weight of something? Usually milliliters per 100 grams per minute. Now, what does that mean? The femur, largest bone of the body. The ovary, very tiny organ. My femur, most likely it does. My femur has a greater flow of blood coming into it. But per 100 grams, not great perfusion. Does that make sense? Okay. My ovary may not have the flow, but per 100 grams, think about an ovary, okay, which several grams maybe, okay, the weight of it, because the blood flow it does have, the ability of the blood to make its way through that organ is greater. So perfusion is greater in the ovary than it would be for the femur. Does that make sense? So, it doesn't necessarily mean that if an area of the body has a huge amount of blood coming to it, through it, okay, that blood is making it to all of its cells. All right? Which, for the most part, is fine. Not every cell of the body needs the same perfusion. And so that's okay. The total flow through the body as a whole is going to vary minute to minute. Why?
Needs vary.
All right. Based upon my activity. For the most part, the body will meet the demands placed upon it. Is that always the case? No. Okay? Because it has the ability to reroute blood, it can. There are factors, though, that are going to control the flow. Pressure, we're going to have different factors that will affect it. When we study any type of physical principle on the flow of blood, it's termed hemodynamics. Definitely a huge area of study. the principles, this study. What is the pressure that is present? What may be causing resistance? Why is this clinically significant? There are going to be multiple conditions that will be encountered that are going to affect this. And no matter what that condition does, the effects can be life-threatening. So, if we're thinking about pressure resistance, there are so many things that are going to affect each of those. What we do know, under normal conditions, the greater the pressure difference, one point to another, because things like to flow with their pressure gradient, okay? The greater the gradient, the greater the flow. Make sense? The greater the resistance. You've got to work maybe against gravity. Maybe there's constriction of a vessel. Whatever the case might be, the greater the resistance, the flow lessens. That makes pretty much, that's sort of like duh statements, right? Sort of like, duh, okay? The problem is, what begins to affect them? One thing we all probably know very well, blood pressure, all right? We all probably know somebody who has blood pressure problems, whether the blood pressure is too high or the blood pressure is too low, because both are life-threatening. What is it exactly? Blood pressure is what is that force that gets exerted on the vessel wall. The heart beats, all right? When the heart beats, we have flow into our pulmonary circuit. Is my pressure high there? No, my pressure is low. But what about pressure of it exiting the left ventricle into the aorta?
High.
It's very strong. How do we know that? We measure it. We put the little cuff on. If it's mechanical, somebody pushes a button and waits for the thing to light up with the numbers. If it's physical, where somebody's got to put the cuff on, have their stethoscope, woo! Okay? They put the cuff on, they got the stethoscope, they start doing the little bulb, and it gets tight and tight and tight, and then they're listening, then they let it go, and they're listening, and we get a value. Systolic, diastolic, we've kind of mentioned that, all right? Systolic, top or bottom number? Diastolic, bottom. Basically, what is the peak, the top number? What is the peak of that contraction of the ventricle. Diastolic. What's the minimum? How high, how hard, how strong for the force, or how much relaxation almost. We have something called pulse pressure. Do not confuse it with a pulse rate. This is the difference between the two. It can vary depending upon where you may have to get the blood pressure from, okay? Sometimes you don't always get it from the arm, all right? It's just a little bit of math. For example, if you had 120/80, well, the difference between them, that's 40. So therefore, your pulse pressure would be 40 millimeters of mercury. That's all it is, just some simple math. Well, when we want to determine a mean, you guys remember that? How you add something up, divide, do all that sort of stuff? If we want to determine what is the mean pressure in my arteries, they do that. We know that certain factors that will be very common are going to affect it. So this mean, basically getting this average, okay? There are lots of factors that will affect it. Gravity. Shoshana said earlier, one of the things that you kind of get concerned about is being lightheaded. Give me a situation where you might get lightheaded. You stand up or get up too quick, either from a sitting position, lying position. But wait a minute, why does that make you the dizzy or the lightheaded? You didn't have time to meet the demands on the tissue. Depending on your age, health conditions, physical conditions, that sort of thing, it's got to have time to catch up. And so what does it do? It makes you go, oh, whoa, oh, whoo, head rush. Okay? And you kind of lean back on something. Because what it's wanting to do is kind of offset, make sure the blood has time to catch up, meeting the demands of the tissues. Therefore, it influences the risk of disorders such as syncope, fainting. That's what it is. Atherosclerosis. People tend to think these two are the same. Athero and arterio, probably because they both end in sclerosis. Did anybody know what that term means? Scarring. There's some type of scarring that is occurring in the tissues. In the case of blood vessels, athero means we now have lipid deposits in that arterial wall. What have I just now done to flood?
Restricted it.
I've impeded it. Think that's going to have an effect on pressure? Of course, because these are two factors that govern it. Kidney failure will affect pressure overall. What is kidney failure?
When your kidneys stop filtering.
The kidney's functions have decreased to a point where you might need kidney transplant. Ooh, did y'all see the article about the doctor who was working on the woman's back and removed her kidney because he thought it was a tumor?
I guess somebody's losing his license.
Yeah. I was just like, what